Hello and welcome to our Meet series. Biology is often viewed as a difficult subject by certain students, and yet it is a fascinating discipline. How it is taught in the classroom will to a great extent influence the students' ability to grasp certain topics. To talk more about this issue, we have in our studio Dr. Tunnicliffe, as well as Professor Michael Reiss, both from the Institute of Education, University of London. Welcome to our studio.
It's very nice to be here.
Excellent to be here.
My first question to you, Dr. Sue. So, to what extent the study of biology helps the learner to understand his life and the environment?
Well, we as human beings are part of the environment. We're part of the living world. So we're also studying ourselves, and we're studying the other living things that are in this world with us. And I think that's very important, and it's very often a source of amazement to students to find out more about our fellow beings on the earth.
To find out more about their own anatomy.
They find out more about their own anatomy, but also see how it relates to other organisms, because we have evolved from an ancestral sort, and you can see the pattern, which absolutely fascinates some children.
Dr. Reiss?
And I think following on from that, because I agree with Sue, what biology can help us to do is see each of ourselves in the bigger scale of things. As Sue says, the way we connect with other animals, other plants, the fact that we have a long past, hopefully we may have a future, and it can give people more of an idea of where they fit into the universe.
And how is the teaching of biology different from the teaching of other subjects? For example, let's say English language.
I think the teaching of biology is different because it's the real world, and the children can see real examples. And if the teachers are showing them the environment, taking them outside of the lab or the classroom and observing the living world in action, as well as studying it in the classroom and the laboratory, there are things to really look at, and the children have their own experiences. You don't have experience of other languages unless you've heard it at home or
It's
around.
not only textbook learning.
It's certainly not only textbook learning. In fact, I do have a theory you can teach an awful lot of biology without the textbook, with the enthusiasm and the knowledge of the teacher.
And like any science, there's a sort of objectivity to biology, which can be actually quite reassuring, both for teachers and for students, but there's plenty of scope for a teacher to craft the way that they teach, and there can be a lot of opportunities for children to develop particular interests within biology. So some children are just far more interested in themselves and anatomy and physiology, and other students are fascinated by the natural world and conservation and ecology, for example.
So tell me, you both have a big experience in teaching. When is the right age to introduce biology in the curriculum? For a child, for example, when is it the right moment to start teaching biology?
I'm going to be very controversial. The right age is in playgroup, preschool, because they've already learnt a lot of biology just from being alive, and I think we need to start there and build on it. And the secondary schools build on the experiences that the children come to them with.
And Sue and I are very much in agreement here. I mean, we've actually done work together in England, I admit, not Mauritius, looking at what 5-year-olds know about animals and plants, and then where they get that knowledge from. And we're finding that even at the age of 5, which is when our official school starts, children have got a lot of knowledge of their local environment, and of course they've got it from family members, from friends, as well as sometimes from television or from books, but especially from members of their family, and that's a wonderful resource for a teacher to build on. For me, the bigger question is whether one should start subjects like physics and chemistry straight away or leave them for a few years. But I definitely, like Sue, start biology as soon as one starts any sort of teaching.
Yes, and I'm actually analysing some data from 4-year-olds about the animals they know in the everyday world whilst I'm here in Mauritius.
Okay, then, so how can biology be taught correctly to arouse the interest of students? Is there like any kind of magical recipe to stimulate them to learn more?
Well, I think it's having enthusiastic teachers who love their subject, actually. Enthusiasm and a sparkle gets through to children. Children aren't stupid, and they know if the teacher isn't really interested, they pick it up. And to be able to go and see real specimens, not look at the pictures in the textbook, which are reduced size, flat diagrams, 2-dimensional, where the real world is 3-dimensional and life-size.
children are definitely more interested in knowing what's around them, surrounding them.
Absolutely.
This is probably what...
Or inside them too.
And I think we have a tremendous advantage in biology that we have got a subject which most students actually do find, when they're quite young, intrinsically interesting, and good teaching can use that. I mean, Sue has mentioned a variety of approaches, doing field work, as well as using textbooks when it's appropriate to use textbooks. And the modern technologies of using computers and so on can help supplement the way that learning in biology has always taken place. I wouldn't want them to replace it, but I'd like them to work alongside traditional methods of teaching.
Talking about innovative technologies, which ones are best suited for teaching biology? Are there any specific ones?
I think it probably depends which aspect of biology you're teaching, but some of the...
How can we use innovation technology to teach biology?
Sorry, can you...
How can we use technology to teach biology?
By choosing the appropriate technology for the task which you want it to supplement.
So to give just one example, because I'm here at these talks today in the symposium celebrating 10 years of the Society of Biology Teachers in Mauritius, one of the talks I heard was all about the difficulties that coral reefs are facing, not just in Mauritius, but around the world as we know. Now, the advantage one's got in Mauritius is one can take students, of course, to see both wonderful examples of thriving living corals in real action and also examples of corals that are beginning to be bleached. And then new technologies can help by using simple little computer programs, for example, to look at the effects of different amounts of global warming on the extent of coral bleaching around the world, and helping students to then begin using computer programs to see, well, how long would the warming have to be for the damage to be irreversible? So it's got real applications, and those are the sort of things that you probably can't do just through textbooks or just in the field, but you want to have both the fieldwork and the textbooks.
Therefore, we need to incorporate both textbooks and fieldworks as well as technology to better teach biology.
And I realise that makes a lot of demands on teachers, and I think demands on biology teachers are sometimes greater than almost any other subject. But the positive side of that is that if one has enough confidence as a teacher to carry on learning throughout one's career, one can gradually extend one's repertoire of teaching.
Because biology is constantly changing, isn't it?
It's constantly enlarging or changing the attitudes, yes.
So we are all aware that students have different learning styles. How can this influence the teacher's approach to teaching in the classroom?
You use all the learning styles in your teaching, you just don't do one. Because even if a child is deemed to be a visual learner, they still learn things from other approaches. You need to have a wide variety. And some subjects are more applicable to certain approaches as well. The teacher is the facilitator and the conductor, if you like, of the learning process.
So I was just going to add to that. I mean, we're very fortunate in biology because, to be honest, if you really suffer from what's sometimes called nowadays dyscalculalia, in other words, you really have real problems with numbers, then frankly almost the whole of mathematics, apart from some bit of geometry, is going to be difficult. Similarly, if one has dyslexia, a lot of learning one's first language is going to be very difficult. But biology is a subject where there are so many different ways of learning that, as Sue says, providing a teacher uses a whole range of ways of learning, there are bits that almost any learner is going to enjoy and be able to really thrive on and feel, well, I'm good at this. There are other bits that they'll find more difficult, but there's enough that they ought to feel confident about.
You have been teachers of biology. What barriers, what difficulties does a teacher face in the classroom while teaching biology?
I think it depends which classroom, actually. There are many different difficulties. If you have a very large class, number of children, and a very small room in which to teach them, there are logistic problems. There's also the issue of equipment, but you can teach biology with a very minimum amount of equipment. You don't need to spend a lot of money on equipment. I do a lot of workshops using everyday materials, really, because we have in biology, we have the living organisms and we can take the children to see them. One of the problems is some teachers interpret the syllabus, the curriculum, very rigidly, and they're frightened to go outside it. Whereas if they go outside it, to illustrate the content of the curriculum, it adds a real sparkle to the lessons, and the children usually respond to that. You don't need to be bound by the curriculum, you need to go beyond it, because that's where the children do very well, and the exams take care of themselves very often.
And I've sometimes taught biology in classrooms where there are no laboratory facilities at all, and although, as Sue says, it's possible, that makes it more difficult. I've taught classrooms where I found that children's behaviour very difficult to manage, and then one just spends most of one's time keeping control and teaching in a very safe way, so that can be a problem. And in a lot of countries in the world, I think it is the assessment system that particularly constrains what teachers can teach. And there's an element of this just being inevitable, but sometimes teachers overestimate the importance of an assessment system, and if one can simply enthuse one's learners, they'll learn quite a lot of biology, even if one isn't forcing them, for example, to learn things off by heart.
So we are talking about biology. There is one aspect of it that's called constructivism. Can you explain what it means and how it can be used while teaching biology?
It's really what parents do with their children. It's building on what the child already has experienced and knows, and you just construct more understanding.
And can I add to that, giving us quite an academic answer just for once?
Definitely.
There are two big sort of strands within constructivism. One, which has been particularly common, I think, in some other science subjects like physics and chemistry, sees children at arriving in school with lots of misconceptions. And the job of the teacher is then to find out the misconceptions that the children have and sort of purge the children of that, get rid of them, before the teacher introduces the real valid knowledge. The much more positive model of constructivism, which I think is one that we favour, is that all of us arrive in a learning situation with only a partial understanding, but the good teacher can positively build on that. So if one's teaching, I'm just making this up as I think now, but if one's teaching about pigeons, one might be interested to know, well, what do children know about pigeons? Now, Mauritius, of course, some children will know about one of your most rare pigeons that's been a great success story in conservation, and that's wonderful. Absolutely, the Mauritian pink pigeon, which we sometimes teach about in England, by the way. Other children will know about pigeons as an example of a pest, a species that in many parts of the world people don't want living in cities. But the good teacher can build on any of those. And in fact, Sue and I have done work where in England some families keep pigeons as pets and actually use them either to race or to take to shows. And you suddenly find that a child whom teachers think doesn't know a lot of biology knows quite a lot about one particular aspect, namely keeping birds.
So we were talking earlier, Dr. Sue, about children using their hands to construct models. How is this going to increase their knowledge or increase their interest?
Well, actually using your hands sort of thing is what I call the fiddle factor, because children like to move and it's a directed movement. But if you have to make a model, if you're asked to make a model of something which you've been told about, you have to conceptualise it and then realise that. You have to use your idea in your mind, your mental model, and express it. And they find it quite difficult to do if they don't really understand. I mean, again, Michael and I have done quite a lot of work on this, and it gives them a three-dimensional approach, but they really have to think where they're putting the parts of whatever model they're doing. And we actually did some in our workshop yesterday. The teachers were asked to make some models, and you have to think. And children who've just learnt by rote and that sort of approach just cannot do this because they don't understand.
And one question. So what interests students who have completed the secondary level education to continue their education to the tertiary level? What pushes them to continue biology at that level?
I think a passion for biology. I mean, that's what we did.
I think a passion for biology does for some students, but I'm also aware that more and more students are thinking about the careers they can have after university. And it's quite interesting in England because the last 10 or 15 years we've begun to find that the number of career options for people who study biology at university is growing and growing and growing. So, for example, the salaries that people end up with are higher if they've studied any of the sciences than if they've studied subjects like English or history or geography, for example.
Finally, Dr. Reiss, what advice would you give to teachers in Mauritius?
Oh, I'd say carry on in many ways the way that you're doing, because you've clearly got a system here that is doing a lot of good. It's very patronising sometimes to give people advice in another country, but I think I'd say, if possible, relax a little bit about thinking about the different ways that children can learn. I do realise there's quite a strong tradition of learning by heart.
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this programme. I thank you both for accepting our invitation. Until next time, viewers, it's goodbye from us.